Hello there, it's Paul here and welcome everyone. Now, I think it was the last video I did the little mini scoops, and which was just basically turned effectively between centres. So I thought I'd then have a go at the multi-axis scoop, and this is my sort of like prototype one that I've just done. And so the idea is that I will turn the cup out first of all, and then I'll then put it between centres so that I can then turn effectively the outside of the bowl and the handle. There's one or two videos online about making these, and I've seen one person do these in two pieces, which sort of defeats the object of just making it all out of one piece of wood all in one go. Another one I did see where they started off with it effectively between centres to create the handle and a large sort of dome shape for the bowl, and then they had a jig that they then put it in. There's a cutout for the handle to fit in with a plate to go over the top, and I just thought that there's got to be an easy way of doing this rather than creating a separate jig. Now, a long while ago I made a smoking pipe, and it did exactly the same sort of thing as I'm going to do here. This is the piece of wood I've got in my jaws here, and what I've done, I've taken out two of the jaws. If you don't feel safe with this, then certainly you can add this to another piece of waste wood. I find this very, very secure. The teeth on the corners of this are dug right into the wood. First thing I found when I did this one was that to start with your piece of wood, ideally it's better to have something that the two sides are square with the base. Doesn't matter if the top's not flat or anything, but you want the two sides square with the base. And the reason for that, it just makes it easier for once you've turned this scoop out, because we've got to go between centres, and it's a lot easier then to mark precisely where the centre is down the piece of wood. The other thing as well is that you just need to try and picture where you're going to have your scoop. I'm not actually going to be putting this back in the chuck again, so I'm just going to do this totally between centres on the second stage. So therefore I need to make sure my spoon is far enough from the ends to allow waste wood at each end. You need to make sure the actual dish here is fully sort of like circular. So all I've done is just from a previous piece of wood I'd found on the shelf, found a piece of wood the right sort of like diameter. I think this is about 25mm, and I've just put a centre line across it just as a guide, and I just cut it off on the bandsaw just so I've got a thin disc on there. Hopefully you can see on this one that it does fairly well sit there. I need it to make sure that it's at least the depth of the centre line, if not ideally a little bit deeper. And then it's a roughly circular shape, because then at least that way when it does become between centres, the walls will hopefully be fairly even thickness away. All I'm going to do now is just turn the cup in here. I'm just regularly stopping here just to make sure that I don't make it too big too quickly. I've actually gone just past the depth on here, so I've probably gone about 2 or 3mm past the depth there. Just allows me for what extra is going to be taken off the top there. And all I'm going to do, it doesn't need too much of a sand up on there, but just quickly run through the grits. And this is what I've got so far, and when I was just marking out my centres here to put this between centre, I then noticed that my walls are actually slightly out to the bottom, and the way you can tell that is that if I measure the wall thickness from the top of the cup here, I've got just about 9mm there. This side it's about a millimetre less, so it means that my walls are sort of sloping across one side a bit. So when I've done this, I've actually took my measurement across the bottom here for where the centre is, the bottom there, and I've just used a square to take the lines up on both sides. The one mistake I also did when I did this one between centres, I used an ordinary long pointed live center. And the trouble with this is that it pushes into the wood, and it pushes can push quite a fairly deep hole. When I'm working on a small piece like this, I can't just move the wood across the center by, say, maybe a millimetre or something, because the hole is just so big that it's going to always push back into where it originally was. So I've gone for my coned live centre on here. So as you can see, I'm severely off centre again, and there you can see the holes where the actual chuck jaws actually dug into the wood, so it had a really good hold onto the wood. The reason we're now going off centre here is because hopefully these centres are around about where this line is in the cup here, maybe a little bit lower. So the first thing I want to do here is I'll just take a lot of this material off the bottom here and then start shaping the bottom of the cup. Now actually trued this up as far as the bottom goes now, and we can see we're getting fairly even walls around there now, so I'm just going to carry on around here first of all. Oh, it's breaking. We've got a break. Well, that failed, and I will see if I can go off and get another one to somewhere to the similar state. I'm back to where I was before this one snapped. It was basically because of just too much tailstock pressure. And just to show you how little I've got on here, and you can see this is actually literally spinning on there. So, but it does still spin up, and I've been turning it like that where I've then got thinner. So I've took this end on here right down to about the minimum I can now, and this end is very thin as well. This piece also has a crack along here, so that's why I've made this a much shorter handle. So sanding up now. Now the important thing on this is that because of these edges, you need to sand at a fairly high speed, because otherwise it's going to wear away more one of these edges more than the other. So sanding needs to be gentle, fairly high speed. And even at that, you'll probably find that it will start softening some of these edges. I can see it's softened that edge already. I've just sanded through the grits there, so that's just come up nicely now, and you can probably, if you looked at this close enough, you just see where the edge has smoothed over on one side there. So I've just gone around with a bit of sandpaper just to round off all the edges a little bit, and it just needs to be piled off now. Haven't tightened this up anymore, so you can just still see it still slips on there, and I will just take each side down a little bit at a time. and then it breaks off. So that's not a problem because the pieces were so thin on there anyway, they can just be snapped off, and I can just sand both of those ends up. I've just sanded the ends off on here, so it's just smoothing off nicely. And I like doing these small ones because I just think it's harder to make small items like this, especially when you want to be precise. It just shows up here, turning between centres, that you can just be even half a millimetre out and it makes such a big difference on the walls. So just going to use, as I say, lemon oil like I did on the previous ones. Just thinks it finishes it off nicely. You can give this several coats. Just need to leave it sort of, it says on the instructions, just leave it 24 hours between coats. That's that one done. And I will do my first one as well. There it goes, so just those two done.